Well, hello and welcome back to the very latest episode of my Love Machine podcast. Now, today I'll be talking to you about a fascinating topic. I'll be talking to you all about the neuroscience of love and attraction. So, James, you're probably asking, what exactly is neuroscience? Well, neuroscience is the scientific study of the nervous system, and it focuses on the brain and how that relates to everything, your emotions, everything that comes about, particularly when it comes to finding love and all the different states that you go through, all the emotions are all affected by neuroscience. So to help me and to explain this in perhaps more comprehensive detail, I've got the wonderful Dr. Mari Kovanen, and she is a registered psychologist and a purposeful dating coach who helps strong, independent, professional women to stop settling, discover inner greatness, date purposefully, and find love with an equal high quality man without wasting more time. And her approach to successful dating is rooted in the psychology and neurobiology of dating. And she has worked for over 13 years with busy professional women who have been in difficult stages and different stages of relationships, from dating, working through relationship difficulties, to recovering after heartache. Now, her mission is to prevent more heartache by guiding professional women to discover their inner greatness through evidence-based methods, become intentional with dating, and attract the love they want. And that's all straight from your website, Mary, so I hope that was right.
Yeah.
How was that for an intro? Was that okay?
Yeah, absolutely perfect. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, welcome. We've been talking a little while on Instagram, and we thought it would be a great idea to get you on here to explain more about what you do, because it's a fascinating topic, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, I love talking about all of that. So, yeah, thank you so much for inviting me.
You're very welcome. So can you explain perhaps a bit more detail about what you do and how you got into this?
Okay. Well, one time I was a busy professional woman and looking for love myself. And if we go all the way back to 2003, I found myself single. And I started dating, and it was the early days of online dating, which is not, there weren't apps or anything like that. It was really much more like there were certain profiles on, websites and profiles. And I kind of reached a point where I was like, okay, I just want to see what is the market, in quotation marks, what's the market like? And started dating a lot. I mean, a lot, really. And initially, it was really fun. And then up to that point in my 20s, I'd been in long-term relationships. So I thought, okay, because those kind of happen easily and what have you, it must be the same. Well, then I come to realize that dating in your 30s is a very different game in many, many, many ways. Yeah. And I, encountered all sorts of characters, met nice people, really lovely dates, but just no kind of, there was nothing more there. But actually now in hindsight, I very much kind of realized that some of those, my early relationships, they had the potential maybe, but I don't think I had kind of discovered who I was. And I went into, I wasn't very conscious when I was dating, and then ended up in situations where I got really fed up with dating. And, I'm sure many women can relate to that. And then after about 2 years or so, having various kind of relationships, or that sort of like, dating situations and what have you, I got so fed up that I decided to go on a break, as you do, because it's like, what is the point? Because nothing changes. And actually, to give you a little bit of background, is that I'm originally from Finland. I went to university here. I came here in 1994 first time. Mm-hmm. So at that point, I'd gone back to Finland to work for a little bit, and I was living in Helsinki, and I realized that, okay, this kind of dating market is not working for me, and I'm in my early 30s. What shall I do? Will I buy my first flat or, my own property? And I kind of had the feeling that, okay, that's it then. There will be no love in my life. Or will I come back to London where I had gone to university and everything. And so I did. And then in that process, I met my husband, and we've been together for like 16 years now. And after I met him, I wanted to kind of specialize in relationships and went to do my doctorate. And in all of that, that's been like relationships has been my focus, and attachment. And I love all about talking about attachment and all of that so much. So from that, really, then having worked with many people who were in difficult relationships and couples, and I realized that actually it's, if you enter the dating world in a more conscious way, and you enter relationships in a more conscious way, then the chances of kind of finding love with a kind of compatible person are probably much better than if you just kind of go without thinking about it too much, and you go with just whatever feels good and so on. And of course, so then I decided that actually, because I do a lot of this sort of work with my individuals, they, every because I'm also work as a therapist, is about kind of self-awareness and all of that, and how then that has transformed clients' relationships, even if it's just one person doing that work. And I realized that actually, if I worked with women in much earlier, before they even enter relationships, they would have hopefully much better chances of finding love with someone who they can build a beautiful long-term relationship with. So yeah, that's really the kind of long story in a snapshot.
So you were doing online dating probably when I first started doing it. It was a long time ago now, back when it was all chat rooms and websites. Do you think that profiles now are the same sort of standard? Because I think looking at profiles, maybe it's just happy memory syndrome, but I look back and think profiles were never this bad when I was younger. And I was looking at profiles and there was lots of detail on them, lots of profile, and always something to engage with them. But nowadays, no one seems to make the effort. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I guess there were those profiles that had really very little, even back in the days. Because, but maybe, I don't know, maybe it was in some ways a bit more serious. Or at least I think, the exchange was really doing like, emailing to each other. And I remember, it very much was kind of like you were exchanging something about your life, through writing, first of all, and then you would maybe speak to them, and then you would go on a date or something like that. So I think it was a bit slower process, which was very, I think it was much better, because now everything's so fast and what have you, and we need time to think and absorb and all of that.
I do agree with you. I think looking back, people didn't have the short attention spans that we've got now, and we've been trained. We want things on demand immediately. We want to flick through the dating apps and get an instant buzz, getting the dopamine hit. This all comes into what we're going to discuss, I guess, doesn't it? And you think, well, I feel amazing for getting that hit temporarily. But back in the day, it was a stretch over a longer period of time. You really got excited when you were getting to know somebody. You think, well, this person's great. And you couldn't go and Google them, look things up and see what they're like on the internet. It didn't exist, did it?
No, absolutely. Yeah. You had to really there was a lot of conversation, and you wouldn't, obviously we always assume things, and we our brain is designed to filling the gaps.
Yes.
But I think there was still, because of the slower process, there was still more of that getting to know someone, even if it was via email. Okay, they might have, I remember when I moved over here and I put my first dating ad on all places. I don't know if Gumtree still exists. I've not been at least on it.
But, I remember Gumtree, yes.
Back in the days, you could find there, place to stay, but also you could find a date there. And that's where I found my husband. Not very clever.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. Yes, I remember. They actually removed the dating feature quite a few years ago.
Yeah.
and you're allowed to advertise events on there that you're doing, and that's about it. And I used to
Yeah.
occasionally put an advert for dating coaching. It never really got any interest. But Gumtree, you don't really hear about Gumtree nowadays, but it does still
No,
exist.
no.
In the
Yeah.
same way, we've got the bigger thing, which is Craigslist, and that still
Mm.
exists, and there's a dating option on there. But that used to be very pornographic at one stage, and it was all
Yeah.
very dodgy. And there are sites like that still. But I won't list them all and give them advertising on this podcast. But I met my own wife from MySpace. Do you remember MySpace?
Yeah. Yeah. Gosh.
Yeah. These things don't exist now, do they, unfortunately?
No.
But
No.
they were good because you spent more time getting to know people, and you got more excited.
Absolutely.
But let's talk now about the sort of clients that you work with. So is it mainly women that you work?
I do work with men too, but in terms of dating coaching,
Yeah.
I mainly focus on women. I have thought about that, because I see on the other side that maybe, but at least for the time being, I focus on women.
Yeah. I coach both men and women, and it's different how you approach that in each way. Everyone's looking for different things and different ages and different levels of being serious and disappointment. But you mentioned also before I mentioned in your introduction that frustration is very, very common in this, and people are settling for the wrong sort of people. And this is what happens. People are just coming out of the pandemic now thinking, I don't want to settle anymore. And they're looking for something a lot more serious. And I mention this a lot on the podcast because it's so true. And I'm saying this every day. And people are saying to me, I absolutely hate these dating apps. I hate these dating sites. I don't want to be using them. But let's talk about the interesting topic of neuroscience now. Can you explain exactly where this fits into dating and also attraction?
Oh my goodness, there's so much. Where shall we even start? So, you mentioned there already dopamines. So we, of course, get these neurochemicals that we have. Everyone knows about those. But I guess what we need to understand about, and what often gets confusing in today's modern society for a lot of people, how we were actually designed, our bodies and the brain was designed when our ancestors lived in caves. So we still have pretty much the same brain. It hasn't changed with kind of women's liberation, liberation and all of this kind of modern, technology. None of that has changed it. So I guess what's important to understand is those sort of basic things about how our bodies respond to when it comes to mating and finding a suitable mate. And this I can totally appreciate that this can annoy some people because, we would like to think and I'm talking now as a woman, obviously, and on sort of what I've heard from many women say, and especially when we talk about professional women, successful women, and how then they approach to finding love, is because we as women, we think that we can do it all, and maybe there's the idea that we can maybe do everything at the in the same way as men. So if we go back and really look at the kind of basics of how we were designed and how our ancestors searched for a potential mate. And so this was essentially, how should I say it now? So men had a kind of, well, essentially everything's about reproduction, but the approach is maybe slightly different for men and women. Women's kind of approach is that they have to find, at the time, there was scarcity in many ways, and women had to kind of ensure that they had someone who would be reliable, was able to, have resources and was able to protect them. Because otherwise, well, what's important was the survival of the offspring. And then that affected who the woman was, for example, engaging with and who they would choose for their potential partner. And then for men actually get dopamine hits for really pursuing women, and they were designed to kind of find and sort of test out, I suppose. The goal for men was to find a woman who would be reliable, because a man wouldn't know if the offspring was his or not. Woman would always know because she's obviously giving birth to the child. So there's very little chances of, of course, baby swapping might have happened sometimes, but probably not. That's maybe been the kind of stories from hospitals or something like that. And I guess that's where it gets confusing. And there's a lot of kind of these rules and what have you that, can women pursue men, and what happens then, and so on. But I guess the point I'm really trying to highlight there, that is from the evolutionary point of view, men get really dopamine kind of rewards for pursuing women, but they get even more if there's rejection or some sort of resistance. So, and if woman is too kind of willing to kind of entertain his advances, I'd be using a little bit old-fashioned. Yeah.
Entertain his advances. I like that phrase.
Yeah. And then he will know if she's reliable, or will she do that with everyone else too. So he will know then that if that offspring if he commits to her, but if she's done this with other people quite easily, then he wouldn't know. So this is kind of like the basic background. Whereas for her, it was all about the kind of protection and that he would bring good quality sperm, essentially. So where it gets then confusing, that because our brains work still in the same way, we get men get still those dopamine hits for pursuing women, and women sometimes say, but how is it possible that he can kind of like want a commitment, but then he can go and kind of sleep with so many people and all of that kind of stuff. And it's not really about game playing, but we need to kind of realize that a lot of times we just, as kind of modern people, we like to think we live in our heads, and we like to kind of think that we are so kind of removed, I suppose, from all of that old stuff. But essentially, I'm saying this again because it's so true in so many ways, that our bodies still function very much in the same way as our ancestors did. And this comes to whether we how we respond to, for example, to emotional threat or to physical threat. Well, those are processed in the same place, for example. So that doesn't really, in our brain, there's no difference. And when it really in dating, so what's confusing for a modern woman is that if she thinks that, okay, at work, in a working situation, I'm equal, and I can go and I run the company, and I'm very kind of driven. But if she takes the same energy then to her dating life, the chances are that she might actually then attract a man who is not willing to kind of put effort to get her attention. And that's where it often gets confusing, and it can get, especially for career-driven women. Also, there might be that they have kind of built their confidence a lot of it on the academic achievement. And then maybe, and this is just from my experience, what I've seen, having worked with the many professional women, and then it's kind of that sort of self-doubt when it comes to relationships, that am I allowing myself to receive in a relationship? And for example, when in dating and in that kind of early dating situations, that if I like to take charge at work, it doesn't mean that I would need to do that at home too, or in dating situations. So learning to receive is really important, because then that will attract a man who wants to put effort and wants to really show up in a relationship. Because if she makes it too kind of well, if she puts a lot of that sort of, I know there's a lot of conversation about masculine, feminine energy, or doing versus being, and all of that, and if she's very much kind of in the doing mode also when dating, and maybe she's organizing the dates and kind of like, putting all of her effort into it, then he doesn't have to do anything. He doesn't have to show up. And then the chances are that she will attract someone who really is quite like a lazy lion, doesn't put effort into it, or is quite flaky, and so on. And then she will, end up with a broken heart and all of that. Because men don't want to compete in love. They don't want someone who is, it's one thing, because in a professional environment, there's, obviously some element of competition. But if you bring the same energy at home, then that doesn't work out. And it's kind of like finding your strength. Obviously, as partners, you have different strengths and what have you. But there's also, for women, a lot of times it's about learning to receive. And meaning that, okay, I can kind of stand back a little bit and see that, does this guy actually, is he willing to put the effort in? Or if not, well, then maybe they wouldn't put the effort in long term either, because the early stages of dating, really, they show a lot about what the relationship is going to potentially be like. And of course, like, with everything, there are exceptions. So just to kind of put that out there, that, there are people who kind of have found happiness, and they do exactly the opposite of what's kind of, suggested or what have you. But it depends on what you're also looking for. So if you are looking for a man who kind of really shows up in a relationship, then maybe it's about kind of, allowing them to show up. And so I don't know, I went a bit off piece maybe. But...
No, that was great. I think what you're saying is very common. I experienced the same thing, many of my professional women as well. They're used to being in charge at work, and they don't really want to be in charge of relationships, but they find that's their natural role. And I it's a bit extreme, but I say they're control freaks in some way. And because they're used to having control, and they're very nervous about giving that away. And this is where we get a bit of misunderstanding, though, I think, sometimes. Because in the early stages of dating, a man might say to a lady, where do you want to go out on the date? And the woman thinks, well, okay, he's not taking control, he's being really laid back, he doesn't really care, he's putting all the pressure onto me to do all the decisions again, and then she falls into that role. But I think what the man's trying to do initially, not always, but quite a lot of the time, is make her feel comfortable and make her feel safe. And this leads to an initial misunderstanding. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. Because essentially it's quite tentative. And then I suppose it's for her to then to decide, okay, what sort of approach do I take with this? Do I sort of suggest that maybe he picks up something, or some sort of something where they're going to go? Or do I say, okay, maybe you negotiate even together that, okay, there's some, have you, I don't know, tried this or that or whatever. But also if it's, I guess it depends a lot on the vibe that you're getting from the other person. But I guess when you are messaging and what have you, it's very difficult to pick up that vibe. So that's why I would always suggest that you go and speak to them, because you get so much more from that person, rather than just a few messages. And that's just, you just don't get much from them at all.
I agree. I always say speak on the telephone before you meet somebody, just quickly, to suss them out and work out what's going on. And if somebody says, where would you like to go? Then you don't have to give them a venue. Just say, I fancy a drink. I like red wine, that's what I like to drink. Maybe there's somewhere nice we can go to. And then put the focus back onto them, taking what you've given them as a little clue. Give them hints, give them little clues, but don't take all the initiative and don't dominate. And I think, oh, great, she likes gin or she likes this, and I know this great place, and they can do a bit of Google research, and then they'll make them feel special, and the balance gets readdressed. But something you mentioned just now, I need to ask you the question: how can women learn to receive love then?
Oh, okay. So everything goes to this becoming really much more kind of conscious. And this is again the term that's probably some people might have heard, some people might not have heard, and maybe it's used slightly differently in different contexts and what have you. But I guess, if I open up a little bit what I mean here, and it's really about kind of becoming self-aware and entering, and this applies to everything really, but in life, kind of becoming curious about oneself and really understanding my journey. Who am I as a person? What got me here? How did my early relationships impact me? And potentially there's a key to that. Maybe I was always, I don't know, the eldest daughter, was always asked to kind of show up and, help the little, baby or what have you. So I kind of naturally took that role then. And then it's about understanding really, okay, so if I always go into these relationships and I really struggle to kind of make space for the other person to suggest something, and I have to be kind of in control a lot, and it's like, okay, what's that telling me about? What's kind of quite maybe potentially painful for me? What's that about? And it, probably goes back to worrying about some, on some level about rejection, whether you are, and of course we all are, because we are social beings. That's how we were developed. Our ancestors survived by being social, and we still are. I mean, one of the things about what we've experienced in the past 2 years is like, social isolation. And you mentioned about people kind of wanting to find now really good quality relationships, and really put emphasis on the relationships, is that they are so key to our well-being. So, gosh, I lost my train of thought again where I was going with that a little bit. But going back to that, it's really how we've been designed, and how important it is to kind of reflect on ourselves and understand those limiting beliefs that have been developed, and unpicking those, and which you can do then through journaling and kind of understanding, reflecting, coaching, all of that kind of stuff. And really then testing it out a little bit. Say, okay, I'm now aware that this is a difficulty for me. Well, how could I, in a small way, maybe make a little bit more space in my, whether it's in a relationship or when I'm dating, and just trying it out. What does that feel like? If I now kind of, instead of, taking charge of planning the date, what if I this time, suggest that he plans it, and see where that goes, and kind of like giving yourself sort of opportunities to test it out, how that goes. And then often, like with anything, when you first started to test it out, it feels really uncomfortable, but then you might realize that actually you quite like it, that there's someone else who wants to kind of take part. And of course, if you've been single for a long time and you're so used to always just taking care of everything yourself, and then it's a nice feeling after you get over the first discomfort. And when you realize that actually in the partnership, there is someone else there, that they take care of, this other thing that I always had to do it by myself before. And now when you find a compatible person, they are actually contributing, and becomes an equal relationship. And so self-awareness and kind of becoming more conscious is really the key.
That's great advice, and it all falls into sort of self-love as well. once you're stronger in yourself and know what you bring to the table, you're going to be more confident and allow someone to look after you. So it all comes together nicely. Do you know, I can't believe it, but we're already at the end of our half an hour session now, and I want to ask you so much more. So can you perhaps give me one quick dating tip using neuroscience to make yourself more attractive and more lovable, perhaps?
Okay. So if you're not doing any kind of mindfulness or anything like that, or meditation, get curious about it and learn about that, because being able to regulate your emotions, whether you are dating or you're in a relationship, is one of the key skills. Well, that's a skill, really key skill for the whole life, and will help you in so many ways. So that would be my one tip.
That's a great tip. I completely agree. It's more about being aware of who you are and all these things. And I think meditation and mindfulness and journaling, all these things can really help you. Yeah, it's about becoming the better version of yourself and being aware that you are enough as you are. And it will all help you to meet somebody else if that's what you want to do. So thank you so much. It's been really educational today. It's been wonderful to talk to you. And I know we'll speak again another time, but thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much, James. Thank you.
Bye for now.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening. I'd love to give you a free copy of my latest book, which you can download right now from my website, jamespriest.com. If you enjoyed this podcast, I'd really appreciate it if you could share the love by taking a few seconds to write a positive review on the iTunes store right now. See you next time.